Topping and SMSL flood the market with repetitive products that have little to no differentiation among them. There are so many DACs and amps in the market, and there's so much hype about all of it that it's a challenge to figure out what's right for you. Through all the topping and SMSL chaff, you might have forgotten about Xduoo. Unlike topping and SMSL, Xduoo has a more limited selection of products. Last year, they released the XA-10, a desktop amp DAC combo. This product costs nearly $500. Audeze Audio loaned me the XA-10 several months ago. Audeze and I have a continuing relationship. They send me gear from time to time to review and return. Audeze is one of my go-to online retailers for audio gear. They carry the same popular stuff as anywhere else and have excellent customer service. If you're in the market to buy new gear, take a look at Audeze Audio. Alright, so what does Xduoo give us for $500, and is it enough to justify the price? Xduoo promises that the XA-10 is an all-in-one product. The marketing says that this device has all the prerequisites of a truly audiophiliac machine. The XA-10 has full support for all types of audio formats, including high-resolution PCM, DSD, and MQA. Xduoo claims that the XA-10 has a fully balanced topography. This means there are two AK-4493 EQ DACs in this device. Each channel has its own amplification circuit. Xduoo also includes an anti-pop feature. Essentially, when you plug your headphones into an amp and turn on the power, you might hear a pop. If you turn off the amp while the headphones are still connected, you might, again, hear a pop. This happens on some products, but not all. For example, it's a documented issue for the $600 RNHP. The XA-10 has Bluetooth reception. You'll get full support of the whole range of Bluetooth codecs, including LDAC. Sadly, there's no Bluetooth transmission. Xduoo claims a maximum of 4 watts at 32 ohms through balanced connection and 3 watts through single-ended. Xduoo includes a full list of connection options. You get RCA input along with coaxial, optical, and USB. The device also has RCA output. Sadly, despite being a balanced DAC, the XA-10 does not have balanced line out. The front panel includes 4.4mm and XLR along with the 1/4-inch headphone connections. There's a rectangular screen surrounded by a red scroll wheel. This screen provides feedback about the input connection, volume, sample rate, selected filters, and gain setting. On the right side of the XA-10 are 3 buttons. The top button lets you select input, the middle calls up the menu options, and the bottom will trigger Bluetooth. The input select button on the unit I received was a little mushy. The other 2 had tactile, responsive feel. The menu button will call up only 2 menu options. You can select between low and high gain and trigger one of 6 DAC filters. There are no other options. You cannot dim the screen brightness, can't check firmware, or do anything else that we have become accustomed to with respect to DAC menus. The entire chassis is metal. It should help disperse heat. The XA-10 sits rock solid on a desk. It's a small device, smaller than I imagined it might have been. Its compact size lets you place it nearly anywhere. Of course, the power button is on the back, which will force you to keep the XA-10 accessible. Overall, this is a fair amount of features, and it's nice to see an AKM DAC back in the market. The build is rock solid. The biggest annoyance, at least for me, is the placement of the power switch. I am not going to waste time on ooey-gooey feel-goodery nonsense. With so many DACs and amps in the market, it's unfair to use amorphous, mysterious audiophile lingo to review a product. Instead, I'm going to do head-to-head comparisons. I'll tell you if I hear a difference and if the XA-10 exhibited any issues during my time with it, or whether it has performance or features that outshined the competition. I decided to compare the XA-10 against the topping EX5 and one of my favorite amp DAC combos, the JDS Labs Element 1st Gen. The EX5 has dual ES9038Q2M DACs compared to the XA-10's dual AK-4493. The Element is a 2018 device and uses an AKM chipset, though JDS Labs does not indicate which one. The tests were done in 2 phases. In Phase 1, I used the XA-10 by itself to determine if there are any audible issues with it. The key questions were whether I hear audible distortion, whether the user interface is easy to navigate, and if there was any audible differences between balanced and unbalanced connection, other than power output, of course. The second phase involved doing the A/B comparisons. I plugged each device into the same PC. I used Voicemeeter Banana to send signal to the XA-10 and each competitor at the same time. I used Amazon Music HD and Qobuz and listened to my test playlist. I connected each product to a 3.5mm passive AP switch. I volume matched to the best of my ability. I used various headphones throughout these tests. This included the Avantone Planar, Allo Audio S4X, Sennheiser HD6XX, and the Head Audio Headphone version 2. With all this preamble out of the way, let's get to the results. Recall, Phase 1 testing was to determine the overall usability of the XA-10 and whether there's any audible difference between balanced and unbalanced connection. Appos, very generously might I add, let me borrow the XA-10 for 3 months. This is the longest I've been allowed to borrow a product from any retailer or company, so I have a chunk of time and experience with the XA-10. Throughout that entire period, I never encountered significant usability issues with the XA-10. The device has never failed at startup. It's never exhibited audible distortion. I've never found the navigation or button layout lacking, confusing, or poor in build quality. In short, the physical construction and features of the XA-10 seem robust, at least through my 3 months of testing. The only caveat is the input select button on my unit, which was mushy, while the other 2 buttons felt fairly tactile. This must be a QC issue with this particular unit. Anyway, the XA-10 never exhibited audible distortion, hiss, or any other hallmarks of poor craftsmanship or shoddy components. The scroll wheel has tactile feedback. Each notch is 1 unit of adjustment. When you select gain in the menu, the change is immediate. You don't have to press any other buttons to activate that function. The DAC filters are as pointless here as anywhere else. They make no audible alterations. The XA-10's screen is probably flickering for you, but that's because the frame rate on my camera is not matched to the refresh rate of the XA-10 screen. In person, no such flickering is visible. And, of course, there was no difference in sound quality between balanced and single-ended output. Now, let's move on to Phase 2 of testing. Remember, I compared the XA-10 against the EX5 and the JDS Labs Element Generation 1. I was able to volume match the XA-10 and the EX5 without problems. Switching back and forth on my passive AB switch, there was no difference whatsoever in sound. There were no alterations between the two in regards to bass, mids, treble, transients, clarity, detail, or any other meaningful factor. As I went through my entire test playlist and then continued into random selections, I could not hear anything to separate these 2 devices. When I turned to the Element and the XA-10 comparison, the results were exactly the same. There was no audible difference whatsoever between the 2 products. The repeated tests back and forth make a few things certain for me. First, the XA-10 has a clean, transparent, neutral sound. It does not affect the original signal. The same is true for the EX5 and the Element. Second, all 3 products are dead silent. Even the now 4-year-old Element does not demonstrate audible distortion or noise of any sort. Finally, all 3 products easily drove my headphone version 2 through their single-ended outputs. None of these products struggled with any of my testing headphones. Overall, the XA-10's performance is perfectly agreeable. It is as competent a device as the EX5 and the now discontinued Element Gen 1. Xduoo claims 4 watts through balanced at 32 ohms and 3 watts through the single-ended. During my time with the XA-10, I never had difficulty driving any of my headphones. This includes the 600 ohm Beyerdynamic T1 2nd Gen and the Modhouse Argons. The T1 doesn't need a lot of power, and usually 100 milliwatts at 600 ohms is sufficient. The Argon needs 1 watt for peak performance. The XA-10 seemed to drive both headphones to their maximum potential. ASR did measure the XA-10. They gave it an unsatisfactory ranking. Among the various measurement complaints were the purported subpar noise, distortion, and jitter numbers. ASR repeatedly mentioned some oddities about the results they were getting. As for power output, I was a little bit confused about the ASR setup. I did not see clear information about whether ASR used the RCA line in or used the internal DAC to obtain the headphone power output measurements. I suspect ASR bypassed the internal DAC on the XA-10, but I could be wrong. Anyway, ASR's power output measurements were the following. In unbalanced connection, 275 milliwatts at 300 ohms and 2 watts at 32 ohms. In balanced connection, 464 milliwatts at 300 ohms and 1.8 watts at 32 ohms. As you can probably tell, the balanced output number of 32 ohms varies greatly from the promised performance on the XA-10. Maybe someone can correct me in the comments, but I do have a hypothesis given the limited information. Since ASR, from what I can tell, was less than perfectly clear about their testing methodology, it is possible these measurements were done using a 2 VRMS input signal in RCA connection. Either Xduoo pulled a topping and SMSL trick and measured their power output with a 4 VRMS or higher input signal through RCA, or they measured the output using the XA-10's internal DAC topography. If Xduoo used the topping and SMSL trick, then we really don't know what the actual power output of the XA-10 is. It might be as ASR measured. If Xduoo used the XA-10's internal topography to obtain power output measurements, then I suppose it might be possible that Xduoo's measurements of 4 watts and 3 watts are accurate, but there's no way for us to be sure. Ultimately, there's obvious discrepancy here. Xduoo is absolutely unclear, and ASR's blog post on this isn't particularly clear either. What is patently obvious, however, is that ASR very much dislikes the XA-10's measurements. One commentator there said they were hoping Xduoo was, quote, consciously not designing to measure well, and guessed that Xduoo wasn't, quote, targeting the ASR end of the market. Well, maybe that's true. Maybe Xduoo didn't give half a fig about the ASR measurement crowd. And if that's true, then I applaud Xduoo. Anyway, I have no idea what the actual power output of the XA-10 is. While ASR used the words odd and strange throughout the blog post, let's be perfectly honest. Topping and SMSL products have repeatedly performed less than promised themselves. It seems to me that ASR's biggest gripe is the distortion, noise, and jitter results, which make no tangible difference whatsoever since your hearing can't pick up any of that stuff anyway. The bottom line is that, in my experience, the XA-10 seems to provide plenty of power for all of my headphones. Whether it actually has 4 watts of power to deliver is a completely different matter. The XA-10 has Bluetooth reception capability. Yet again, we are given an expensive device that does not transmit Bluetooth. The XA-10 is not capable of multi-point connection. You can connect to one source at a time. The Bluetooth connection was easy. Just hold down the Bluetooth button until the device goes into pairing mode, then select the XA-10 among the options on your source. Bluetooth transmission and quality have inherent limitations. Despite what the marketing says, Bluetooth is not high resolution. It is a lossy signal whose strength and quality is highly dependent upon the environment and distance from the source. That being said, the XA-10 works as well on Bluetooth as the EX5. There was no obvious difference in sound signature between Bluetooth and wired connection. It just seems to me that in the rush to push out DACs and amps, companies are leaving out material improvements. Measured improvements, the type that people on ASR get excited over, have no real-world application. Unfortunately, that's the crowd topping and SMSL keep aiming at. Whether Xduoo intended to not follow the ASR trend is up for debate. I have no idea. But clearly ASR was not pleased with the measurements, although ASR didn't make a comment about the power output discrepancy. I think Xduoo makes good products in general. I've had my XD05 for years, and it's a beast of a portable amp DAC, and it works fine. I also have the MT604, the tube hybrid amp Xduoo released last year. It is also a good product with its own quirkiness. Now, with the XA-10, Xduoo attempts to offer something new into the market. Aesthetically, they definitely make that goal. The XA-10 is a sturdy, compact device. It is easy to use. It is, in my opinion, an attractive piece of gear. The XA-10 also has a robust feature set. You get Bluetooth in all its codec forms, MQA, all types of high-resolution audio support, and balanced output. The screen is cute and clearly an improvement over some alternatives in the market. But when compared against the likes of the EX5 and the JDS Element Gen 1, the XA-10 offers nothing sonically unique. The XA-10 is a transparent, neutral amp. It's as clean and silent as its competition. It's as sturdy as the alternatives. But at nearly $500, this device really needs to push limits or offer standout features that other products don't have. Unfortunately, the XA-10 does not succeed. This brings us to value. Look, I think the XA-10 is a good product. It functions quite well. It is plug and play. It is simple yet powerful. But what does it offer that the cheaper EX5 doesn't? Power output, you might say, but that's not necessarily true. The measurements don't seem to corroborate Xduoo's claims. Their measurements might be incomplete or faulty, but Xduoo doesn't exactly offer precise explanations of how they achieved their own numbers. The power output discrepancy is an issue for me. Xduoo clearly wants people to believe that the XA-10 has 4 watts of delivered power, but we don't know how that measurement was achieved, and it directly contradicts what ASR found. In fact, ASR never got close to Xduoo's promised numbers. In real-world head-to-head A/B tests, there is not an iota of audible difference between the XA-10, EX5, or the aging Element Gen 1. It is hard to recommend a product that doesn't bring something usefully different into the market. When companies like Topping and SMSL flood the market with rinse and repeat gear, we lose differentiation. When every few months a new DAC or amp is yet again available, and when those new products give us nothing new that the older stuff didn't already have, we are left in an ecosystem that is homogeneous. Unfortunately for Xduoo, they stepped into this uniform playing field. The XA-10, it is my deep regret to say, has no basis to cost $500. I'm not even concerned about the ASR measurements other than the power output. I enjoyed the XA-10 for these past few months, but I can't buy it for myself. I wouldn't know what to do with it. With so many good options in the market, some of which are significantly cheaper than the XA-10, you really have to love the design or be willing to give Xduoo the benefit of the doubt about its numbers to be okay with spending $500. If Xduoo gave us clear information about the power and lowered the price to around $400, I think my position would be different. At this juncture, however, the XA-10 is simply not a product that has value.